Welcome back to another LAUSD STEAM Bytes. Today's STEAM Byte is different from previous Bytes. In this STEAM Byte, we have Delaney Anderson, who's a master's candidate at the California State University, Long Beach. A master's candidate is someone who's getting their master's degree. We thought it would be interesting to hear the story of someone who's in the process of becoming a professional in STEAM. Delaney is originally from Kingston, Washington. She moved to Long Beach to attend Cal State Long Beach, where she's working on her master's degree in biology. Delaney's thesis is focused on studying and testing gene regulators involved in leaf senescence in the Arabidopsis plant. While working on her master's, Delaney has also been working with two different organizations, the Institute for Conservation Research and Education and Masters of Biology for Diverse Scientists Club, where she volunteers at local high school science classes and at the Back Bay Science Center to educate students in plant science. While going to school, Delaney also worked at Cal State Long Beach as a teaching assistant, teaching genetics lab. Before coming to Long Beach, she graduated with a bachelor's in science in biology from Western Washington University, where she researched cottonwood genetics. After Delaney graduated, she went to work at Washington State University as a small fruit researcher. Please welcome Delaney Anderson.
Thank you so much. So today I want to first talk about what I study, and then I want to get into a little bit on how I got there. So I study leaf senescence, which is the study of how plants age and they recycle their leaves and they kill them off and they use that nutrients to support new growth, like reproductive growth, like flowers, or to store in tissues. So this can occur due to the age of the plant. Your leaves only last so long. And so after a certain amount of time, they get killed off and recycled, and then you get new leaves developed. Environmental changes, just like fall, during the fall, you see leaves go through senescence when they turn orange and they fall off the tree, and those nutrients are stored in the trunks of trees. This can also happen due to developmental cues, such as the reproductive transition. Plants sometimes can senesce off some of their leaves and use that to support the new flower growth. So in leaf senescence, I'm looking at three potential regulators, ERF54, BHLH112, and ERF11. So we're working on identifying their roles in leaf senescence, and they haven't been researched in this capacity before. So really quickly, I wanted to just give a quick intro to genetics because that's really how I'm monitoring and studying this pathway. So in your chromosomes are genes, that's what they're comprised of, and the genes are made of DNA. So eventually your genes will produce a product that is a functional unit and does a job in your cell. So your protein is going to do a particular job, and each one has their own job. And so what happens is you start out with your DNA, your gene up here, and then it gets transcribed to RNA. And that is so it can become active. It's like you're turning it on and you're sending it to the printer so you can get your copies of your protein. Once your protein is made into amino acid chain, as you see here, it'll fold and become that functional unit, like I mentioned earlier. So now that you know what I do, I really want to start about how I got there. So where it all began. So when I went to high school, I graduated in 2016, which wasn't that long ago. It doesn't feel that long ago anyways. So when I was in high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I gave myself the most opportunities as possible. So as you can see down here, I was a cheerleader. I did marching band. I also did tennis and other clubs in my high school because, like I mentioned before, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I wanted to give myself as many opportunities and choices as possible so I can start to figure out what direction I wanted to go. I also volunteered within the community. So as was mentioned before, I was born and raised in Washington. And so I volunteered on the local Native American tribes at the elementary school, being a teacher's assistant to get more experience. And then when I graduated high school in 2016, I also graduated with my associates. So I have two pictures here of graduation, one in purple, and that's my high school graduation. And then 2 weeks later, the graduation gown in red is my associate's graduation. So in Washington, there's a program called Running Start, which allows you to go to your local community college rather than your high school for your junior and senior year. And those credits were transferred back, and I was able to get my associates this exact same year I graduated from high school. And even though I didn't know what I wanted to do, I took advantage of this because the high school that I was going to actually paid for all of the classes. And I was interested in going to college. I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do. So I started taking the general classes at my community college. So like English 101, business, history, poli-sci, and a whole bunch of other topics. So finally, when I did make my decision on what school I went to, I was the first of all my siblings to go live on campus and go to a college. It was really intimidating, if I'm going to be honest, because I've spent like my whole life with my family and hadn't had anyone else go to college or go live on campus. And so to not know that world and then move far away was a transition, of course. And when I got there, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went to the advisor and she told me to get a business degree. So I started taking all the business classes and I was told I could graduate within the year, and I was living on campus, but I really wasn't happy and I really wasn't enjoying it. So I really started looking at my other opportunities and what else the university had to offer, which is when I came across their travel abroad office. So the university has so many resources. So does many high schools and educational facilities to really support you in the pursuit of your degree. And so I was able to go to a travel abroad in Paris for a month through my university at a highly discounted rate. And it was the craziest experience of my life. I mean, I was 19 and never left the continent before, and now I went alone. And the university gave me these resources to be able to experience these things. So when I returned to campus for my second year, I was working as an RA. And so here you can see me in the middle, and I'm wearing my Western t-shirt, some leggings and some sandals. And that was my staff for the year. Really great group. I only did it for 2 quarters. This was actually something that I really struggled with. So being an RA was an amazing experience, and you really get to build a community, which I really enjoyed since I really loved giving back to our community. But it took so much time that I began struggling in the courses that I decided I finally wanted to take. And so I decided to take a step back, which was really hard because it felt like I was quitting. And I don't necessarily like to do that. But at a certain point, I had to realize that my happiness and well-being were greater than this community that I was trying to build. And I needed to be able to focus on my own education. That's why I was at school. So I was struggling in my courses, and I again started using those resources that the university had, the tutoring center, office hours for my professors, things like that. And that's when I also began doing research on campus. That was also another reason why it really motivated me to quit being an RA, is because doing research on campus took quite a bit of my time, about 30 hours a week, and it's only volunteer time. So it gets quite hectic trying to balance it, and being able to balance both like being an RA or a full-time job, full-time classes, and then volunteering on top became too much, and I had to rebalance my priorities. And then my third year and my final year, I graduated in 3 years. I worked part-time at Home Depot or Lowe's in the plant section because I was so interested in plants. Any experience whatsoever could get me even a little bit closer to my goals, and I was so excited about it. I was doing research on plants in campus, 30 hours a week on top of that, and I was taking full-time classes. And I definitely filled my course load to the brim every single quarter and semester. And I set these personal goals for myself. A lot of the times people told me that, oh, it's not possible to get your bachelor's in 3 years. Oh, it's not possible to complete what you need to get done. It's not possible to work and do school and things. But I really focused. I made it my goal. I organized and I gave it my all, and I really made it possible, which it really is possible. So don't get don't get disappointed or discouraged. So after I graduated from my bachelor's, I started doing my master's in fall of 2020, and I started online. My classes were online, but I still had to move down to Southern California because my research was in person. And so that's where I started studying leaf senescence that we covered earlier, and volunteering within the community with ICRE and MSDB. So that's where I went to the Back Bay Science Center, volunteering with high schools, conducting research with students and showing them what research looks like. And it was a great way to expand my knowledge and think about different ways to interpret the data that I'm giving these students and hear their thoughts and think about it in another way. And last but not least, support system. So I have this bullet point, and I think it's very important. I always saw people going to out-of-state colleges, even at like 18 when they first graduate high school, and I never thought anything about it. And so when I was 21 and applying for a master's, I was like, let's do it. Let's go to sunny California, get out of the rain. And it was a really hard transition because not only did the pandemic hit, so I was really quite stuck inside, but I moved away from my friends and family. So it was quite an adjustment, but luckily I had some amazing roommates that made it a lot easier, but definitely something to think about. So again, I just really want to emphasize the importance of your extracurriculars and how my extracurriculars really fueled my passion. So as I mentioned before, I have been volunteering at science centers, volunteering with K through 12. I did genome research on trees at Western Washington University, volunteering within the general community and donating. So for example, when I worked at the Strawberry and Raspberry Research Center at Washington State University, we would donate our fruit that we would collect, just pallets upon pallets of fruit, to the local food bank to really give back to the community that we're doing research in. And finally, plant restoration projects are also a great way. I have been getting educated on so many new things that I'd never known before as I start these restoration projects, but you're also building your community back up and these natural ecosystems. So just a very brief educational review. I graduated high school in 2016 with the same time when I graduated my associates. I finished my bachelor's in 3 years with some very hearty determination and goals that I set for myself while doing some research as well on campus. And then I started my master's in 2020, researching leaf senescence. And so really quickly, I just want to point out, I didn't know if you guys noticed, but from 2016, the year I graduated high school, to 2020, the year that I started my master's, that's only 4 years. And so when I first went to college to get my bachelor's, everyone told me that I'd be there for at least 5 years. And everyone told me how painful school would be and just to try to get it done as quick as possible. And although I did get it done quite quick, it wasn't because it was painful. I loved getting my education, and I still do. The whole point of being at school is to learn and to really fall into your passion and show what you can give back to your community with your education. And so I was able to get all the way to my master's in 4 years, and I'm actually the youngest in my cohort. So it is possible if you really make those realistic goals for yourself. So although I showed you guys my educational background, I think what really defines my pathway is my research journey. I think that is a little bit more significant rather than my education, although that's very important. My research has given me experience that is nothing like just learning about it in a classroom can give you. So when I was at Western Washington University, I was doing research on cottonwood and Pacific madrone. This is a Pacific madrone right here, if you guys can see it in the far left picture. So we'd collect leaf samples. We'd go on these hikes in parks, and we'd collect these samples and take them back to the lab for analysis for the Pacific madrone trees. And then after I graduated, I worked at Washington State University doing raspberry and strawberry research. So these little boxes that you see here are called tissue culture boxes. So they have a little plant in them with some jelly nutrients on the bottom because they're so young and small and sensitive. The box has high humidity to keep them happy and healthy. Eventually, when they would grow big enough, we'd take these little boxes out to the greenhouse and plant them and follow our plants eventually through the greenhouse and out to the agricultural field where we would run tests on them. And last but not least, last on my research journey was my Arabidopsis research. So we mentioned earlier that I was doing studying Arabidopsis, but here they are. They're these tiny little plants related to the mustard seed. So I use these to study leaf senescence because they're so fast growing. They go from seed to seed in about 60 days. And so we're able to track these changes quite fast, which make it really nice for research. So right down here is a gel electrophoresis. So these are one of the techniques that I use constantly in my laboratory. And we do this to be able to tell what genes or like what allele or what type of gene that your plant has, whether it's a normal gene or potentially a mutant gene. And so here's just an example of one of those gels. So last but not least, I want to give some advice for applying to scholarships, programs, and just school in general. So first things first, scholarships. Start early. It is very important to give yourself as much time as possible. So again, use your resources. Look at community scholarships even, or local sponsors. Apply for the small scholarships, but apply for a whole bunch of them because it'll increase your odds that you're going to get some of them. Same thing for programs. Start early. And again, cast a wide net. And what I mean by that is apply to a whole bunch of schools. So when I applied first to get my bachelor's, I applied to 7 schools. I only was really interested in maybe like 1 or 2 of the schools, but I wanted to give myself as many options as possible. And when it came time for me to pick one, I picked a school that wasn't even one that I was originally considering that I ended up getting into. And it really worked out for me. Additionally, drafts. So you're going to most likely write a letter with your application. Again, start early, make sure it's well written, use your resources, maybe ask a friend to read it over or a teacher if they have time, because it really is a commentary on who you are. If you don't spend a lot of time on your application letter, they're just going to see just your grades and nothing else. And a lot of time universities want to see who you are and what you're going to bring to their unique environment. And last but not least, and this is kind of my personal mantra, but you go to learn. A lot of people, especially in STEM, get imposter syndrome, which is the feeling like they don't belong or that they're not smart enough to be in this field. But that's the whole point of school. You're going to learn, you're going to get an education and to be able to do these things eventually. And so when you have questions or you don't understand the material, it's not that there's anything wrong with you. You're here to learn. And so that's something that even I have to remind myself constantly. I am here to learn, and it is okay if I make mistakes or maybe if I don't even do well on a test or something, because I'm here to learn, and that's more important than my grade. So next, I want to go over some STEAM components in the laboratory. So as you guys know, STEAM is comprised of science, technology, engineering, art, and math. So first, science, I would say the most scientific thing there is when I think of science is my scientific notebook, because I write everything in it. Every time I come in to do anything, I write down what experiment I'm doing. I write down what samples I'm doing. I'm writing down how I did the process, if I noticed anything interesting during the process. And I also comment on my analysis. Your scientific notebook is so important for future people to look at your data and see your progression, but also to potentially, if they wanted to recreate your experiment, they should be able to off your scientific notebook. So next is technology. So we use technology every day in the lab. So we use it to run experiments with controlled heating and cooling and shaking, so we can isolate DNA and RNA and test it. Next is engineering. So as I mentioned earlier, how proteins are a functional unit, there are mutant lines of many plants, just like for Arabidopsis, where certain proteins are knocked out or non-functional anymore. And they do this because it can kind of give hints or clues to what that protein does within the cell and what its role is. So that's something that is engineering is producing recombinant or mutant plants for analysis or testing. And art. Art is so important, I believe, in STEM, because the whole point of doing science is eventually to communicate your ideas to explain a natural phenomena. And so you're not trying to prove anything, but you're trying to suggest to your audience what you found and maybe what a plausible explanation could be. And so scientific articles are using figures to suggest their conclusions. And so you really have to be as clear as possible, and also making them as both aesthetically pleasing and clear to understand really helps you communicate your ideas to other scientists. And last but not least, math. I use math literally every single day. I do calculations daily to perform dilutions, reactions, and to produce chemicals that will go back into other reactions. So the concentration of a lot of my buffers and things like that really matter. And so if even one little thing is off, it can cause a problem and can lead to potentially no results, which is not something we want. So making sure I'm really consistent with my math skills and know how to do them is really important. So now I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the diversity in STEM. So first I want to talk about just the men to woman ratio. So I know that men to women is not a perfect way, but this is just United States Census Bureau. I know that other people have more identities. However, this is just the data that I had collected from their website that was already pre-made, and there wasn't a third category. Anyways, so we have jobs in STEM like healthcare, computer jobs, engineering, physical scientists, life scientists, math, and researchers. So when you look at this, it's pretty blue dominated, which means it's pretty male dominated. In science, the healthcare practitioners, you often think of like nurses as more of commonly a woman's job in STEM. So we do see a high percentage of healthcare workers are women in comparison to men, but every other field in science is predominantly dominated by men. So I want to talk a little bit more about that. So besides just male versus female, I mean, the diversity isn't great. So as we saw, it's majority male dominated, but of that, 69% of the population in STEM is white, and only 9% is African American, 13% is Asian or Asian American, and only 7% is Hispanic. And last but not least, only 0.3% is American Indian or Alaska Native. And this is really important because when diversity, so this is really important because diversity brings so much to STEM and STEAM. So diversity brings new ideas, different ways to think about a topic, innovation, equally diverse relationships with both your peers and mentors, and encouragement to the community. I mean, there is no reason that anybody can't be a scientist, for example, and it just shows other students. For example, like in my lab, there's a lot of male graduate students and not as many female graduate students. And so it kind of shows to the undergraduates that females can do research and we are represented and there's no reason we can't. And it's great to have the diversity in thoughts in the laboratory. But you can't just expect diversity to happen without any encouragement or fostering it. So try to share about yourself, what you feel comfortable. So that might be your pronouns, maybe where you're from, or some things you're interested in. I try to ask open interpretation questions. It's really interesting to hear how people think and how their brain kind of processes different material. And so when you ask that open interpretation question, you really get such a wide variety of answers. And it's kind of interesting to see how they all connect together, or if there is a dissonance. Additionally, I would say get creative. So previously in my courses that I've taught, I've done anonymous polls. I've incorporated student ideas or peer ideas. I've had students break into smaller groups and supply thought questions. I've also tried to meet with students one-on-one, like before they leave, just to talk to me about their experience doing the assignment and anything they might need. Additionally, support your peers. So if you're a student, for example, and you notice someone hasn't contributed to the discussion for a while, I like to ask them, what are your thoughts on the topic? It's an open question. It allows them, again, to interpret it really any way they want to and give any sort of feedback. It doesn't kind of skew them towards making them have a certain type of answer. And then I also say multiple ways to teach one subject. So you also need to adjust for the diversity by giving students enough resources. So I like to give my students recordings of me doing practice problems, but I also would give them their own worksheets. I would give literature links. I've given book recommendations and things like that, just so they can, if they wanted to, on their own time, look at these supplementary materials or use these additional materials to help them really get to learn and get a grasp on the material. And thank you guys so much. This is my contact information if you have any questions. This is my email at delaney.anderson@student.csulb.edu. And this is my Twitter, Plants and Genetics, which is focused on plant biology and science and retweeting articles and things like that.
Thank you so much, Delaney. That was wonderful. We truly appreciate the fact that you're sharing your STEM journey with us and with our students and with our teachers and parents. I'm thrilled because, again, my background in college was agricultural science and management. And so hearing you talk about all of this, just brought some great memories back. So thank you. Just for one thing, you kind of mentioned something about when you feel that you don't belong. What was that term that you used for that?
Imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome.
You don't belong, or that you're not smart enough,
Right.
you're not capable.
Can you give our students a little bit more advice on that, and just, and how you deal with that when you feel like you don't belong? Because again, what we see so often is the students who feel that and who still persevere through it, in the end, they're the shining stars, right? And we hear some incredible stories, and our STEAM Bytes were actually regarding people who actually went through all of those different imposter syndromes or whatever it might be that held them back, and they were still able to overcome that.
I think for me, having that personal mantra, I know that's something that's silly, but you're here to learn. It really helped me because it really shifted my focus from being embarrassed about what I'm doing and about what I'm asking to really about getting that education that you're there for. I would also say making goals really helped me. Making small goals, and sometimes the goal is just to get over the hump and get to the next thing, can really help you keep track and keep going forward. I know sometimes even in my research, like I mentioned before, I've had people tell me, you can't finish your degree that fast. Like that doesn't work like that. Or you can't, like, that's crazy to be in a master's program at 21. But really, I listened to myself, I listened to my passion, And I accepted that I'm here to learn. And yes, I'm very flawed, but just giving it my all to my best ability. And even if it isn't exactly perfect the way it when it turns out, I know I've learned something from this opportunity. And next time, if I have it again, I'll do even better.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, in terms of it wasn't perfect, we can assume then that your STEAM journey was not perfect, right? And you've gone through multiple hurdles, right? So again, those hurdles are a part of our journey, right?
Yeah, I definitely struggled in my science classes. As I mentioned earlier, when I first started them, I actually got a C in my first molecular biology class, which was so heartbreaking because that was my future career plans. So it felt very like, oh my goodness, I can't do this. But I just like remembering that personal mantra, like, you're here to learn, and trying to set my own goals, and focusing on my learning journey really helped me push through it.
That's great. And again, Jaspreet and I, the reason we actually started this whole STEAM Bytes program is just that, to really highlight the STEAM journey of people like you, and to share that with our students right now. Because we kind of go by our favorite quote, my favorite quote, which is that you can't be what you can't see, by Mariam Wright Edleman. And again, if our students don't see, if our girls, in school don't see other girls in the STEM profession, they're just going to assume that that's not for them, right? And to be able to see, themselves, a little bit of themselves, in these STEM professions, even in the education process. I mean, I think that's great. That's amazing. And that's exactly why, we're doing this. So thank you again for sharing that. And just as a final, just a piece of advice, do you have anything you want to say or share with not just our students, which you gave a lot, but also maybe with our educators, as well as parents who might be watching this? Is there anything that maybe parents need to know to be able to support their children?
Yeah, so I think my parents did this very well. They encouraged me very strongly, yet also kind of firmly. So my parents really did not let me give up easy. As I started going through these classes, sometimes it can be discouraging, and they didn't necessarily know anything about my topic, but they're like, there's no way you're quitting. You're going to do this, and you got this, and you're smart, and you're capable. And they were encouraging, and they may not have known anything about my topic, but they gave me that support to push through these difficult times. For teachers, I would say giving those additional resources, and making sure you're fostering diversity. It really makes a difference in the classroom and for those students. You can really see some students begin to thrive as they see these new materials, and have a chance to really expand their mind past just even what sometimes the classes cover. Because sometimes it's even hard to find materials past that, or finding a good resource to get started.
That's great. That's great. And I love what you said about for parents too. The fact that, a parent doesn't have to be a botanist in order to support a future botanist, right? So, even if the parent's not in a STEM or STEAM field, they can absolutely support our students in their STEAM journeys.
Yeah, and I also think it's really important to emphasize supporting your child's dream. So sometimes it's really easy to think about like, oh, like maybe a business degree is really universally helpful. So for example, like everyone told me to get a business degree because that's why they thought I should, but it wasn't my passion. And so eventually I figured that out and I followed the route that I wanted to. But if I didn't, I would never have gotten here. And I think just realizing your child's dream is just as important as them hearing your opinions.
Yeah, thank you so much. And again, thank you for joining us today, and again, sharing your story with us. And again, we wish you the best for your future journeys as well. All right, thank you. Take care. And for everybody, please just to be aware that we're going to have more STEAM Bytes coming up. So in the future, please keep an eye out for our YouTube channel. Thank you and take care.